The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as Alexander Thornton's voice cut through the charity gala like a blade. "Do you have any idea who I am?" But the waitress who faced him, steady, unafraid, would give him an answer that would change everything. Before we continue on this wonderful story, please subscribe to this channel to support our great work. The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom cast dancing shadows across 500 of the city's most influential faces, each one worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. Alexander Thornton stood at the edge of the crowd, his Armani tuxedo perfectly tailored, his jaw perfectly clenched, watching the parade of wealth and pretense with the detached air of a man who had long ago stopped feeling impressed by anything money could buy. At 42, Alexander commanded a business empire worth $12 billion. Yet tonight, like every night for the past 3 years, he felt hollow. The annual Children's Cancer Research Gala was supposed to be about hope, about saving lives, about making a difference. Instead, he saw networking opportunities disguised as compassion, tax write-offs masquerading as generosity. "Alex." Senator Patricia Holloway materialized beside him, her smile as polished as her diamonds. "Wonderful turnout tonight. Your foundation's contribution this year is simply magnificent." Alexander nodded curtly, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room. "It's what Emma would have wanted," he said, the words feeling like glass in his throat. The senator's expression softened with practiced sympathy. "Your daughter would be so proud. 3 years now, isn't it?" 3 years, 2 months, 16 days, Alexander replied automatically, then caught himself. He cleared his throat. "If you'll excuse me, I need some air." He moved toward the terrace, but his path was blocked by a server carrying a tray of champagne. The young woman looked up at him with warm brown eyes, offering a gentle smile. "Champagne, sir?" Alexander barely glanced at her. "No." His tone was dismissive, cold. The voice of a man who had forgotten how to see service workers as human beings. The waitress, Isabella Martinez, had been on her feet for 6 hours, her lower back aching, her smile unwavering despite the condescending looks and casual dismissals she'd endured all evening. At 28, she had learned to make herself invisible to people like Alexander Thornton, to move through their world like a ghost, present but unacknowledged. But something in his voice, in the terrible emptiness behind his eyes, made her pause. She had seen that look before, in the mirror, during the long months after her father's death, when grief had threatened to swallow her whole. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked softly. Alexander turned to her, startled. When was the last time someone had asked him that question? When was the last time anyone had looked at him and seen past the billion-dollar facade to the broken man beneath? "I'm fine," he said, but his voice cracked slightly on the word fine. Isabella hesitated, then stepped closer. "My father used to say that fine was just another word for drowning quietly." For a moment, Alexander's carefully constructed mask slipped. In that instant, Isabella saw him. Not the billionaire, not the philanthropist, but a man carrying a weight that money couldn't lift. Have you ever felt invisible in a crowded room, or seen someone else struggling behind their success? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The call with his board had lasted exactly 12 minutes and 37 seconds. Long enough for Alexander to discover that his most trusted partner, Richard Jenkins, had been orchestrating a hostile takeover for months. Long enough for the champagne he'd finally accepted to turn bitter in his mouth. Long enough for the careful control he'd maintained for 3 years to begin cracking like ice under pressure. Alexander stood in the ballroom's alcove, phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "What do you mean the Singapore contracts are void?" "Those were Emma's accounts, Richard. She built those relationships before." His voice caught. "Before she died." Through the phone, Jenkins' voice was silk wrapped around steel. "Alexander, you've been distracted. Grief is understandable, but business is business. The board agrees you need time to heal. The board that you've been poisoning against me for months. Alexander's grip tightened on the phone. Those relationships, those contracts, Emma worked on them from her hospital bed. She made me promise. Emma's gone, Alex. It's time to let go. The line went dead. Alexander stared at his phone, his hands trembling with rage and something deeper. A grief so profound it threatened to consume him where he stood. 3 years of holding everything together, of honoring his daughter's memory through work, through success, through the foundation that bore her name. All of it crumbling because he'd been too broken to see the knife aimed at his back. He needed air. He needed space. He needed. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound like breaking promises. Oh! Isabella appeared instantly, as if materialized from the shadows. She knelt gracefully, her black uniform dress pooling around her as she began collecting the larger pieces of crystal. "I'm so sorry, sir. Let me clean this up for you." Alexander looked down at her, really looked, and something inside him snapped. Here was another person treating him like he was fragile, like he needed to be cleaned up after, like he was just another mess to be managed. "Don't," he said, his voice sharp. Isabella glanced up, her hands full of glass shards. "Sir, I said don't." Alexander's voice rose, carrying across the immediate area. Several nearby guests turned to stare. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Isabella's eyes widened, but she remained kneeling, her composure steady. "Yes, sir. You're Mr. Thornton." "That's right. Alexander Thornton. I could buy this entire hotel with my pocket change. I could buy you." His voice was getting louder, drawing more attention. The conversations around them began to fade as people turned to witness the spectacle. Isabella slowly stood, the broken glass carefully contained in her hands. Her voice remained calm, professional. "I understand you're upset, sir. Would you like me to get you another drink?" The kindness in her tone, the same gentle concern she'd shown him earlier, only made Alexander's rage burn hotter. How dare she pity him? How dare she look at him with those soft brown eyes that saw too much? "Upset?" Alexander laughed, the sound bitter and jagged. "You think I'm upset? I'm not upset, I'm furious. Do you know what it's like to build something from nothing, to create an empire, to save lives through your foundation, only to have it all threatened by vultures who think grief makes you weak?" The ballroom had gone quiet now. 500 of the city's elite stood frozen, champagne glasses half raised, watching Alexander Thornton. The man who never showed emotion, who never lost control, completely unravel in front of a waitress. "Sir," Isabella said softly, "perhaps we should step somewhere private." "Private?" Alexander's voice cracked like a whip. "Why? Because you're embarrassed to be seen with me? Because I'm making a scene? Because successful men aren't supposed to feel anything?" His chest was heaving now, years of suppressed pain pouring out in a torrent he couldn't stop. "Do you know what it's like to hold your daughter's hand while machines keep her alive? To make promises you can't keep? To watch the light go out of the most beautiful eyes in the world and know that all your money, all your power, all your success means absolutely nothing?" The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Isabella stood perfectly still, her hands steady despite the sharp glass she held, her eyes never leaving Alexander's face. "Do you know what it's like?" Alexander continued, his voice breaking. "To wake up every morning and have to choose between honoring her memory and falling apart? To have people like you look at me with pity, as if I'm some wounded animal that needs to be handled carefully? People like me?" Isabella's voice was still soft, but there was something new in it now, a quiet strength that made Alexander pause. "Yes, people who," he stopped, suddenly aware of what he was saying, of how he sounded, of the hundreds of eyes watching his complete breakdown. Isabella took a step closer, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of the silent room. People who work 3 jobs to pay for their mother's cancer treatments? People who understand what it's like to make promises to dying parents? People who know that grief doesn't discriminate between penthouse suites and one-bedroom apartments. Alexander's mouth fell open. People, Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger, who know that the hardest thing about losing someone you love isn't the dying, it's the living afterward. It's getting up every morning and choosing to keep going when everything inside you wants to stop. She held up her hands, still full of broken glass, and Alexander saw them trembling slightly, not from fear, but from her own barely contained emotion. So yes, Mr. Thornton, I know exactly what it's like. And the difference between us isn't money. It's that I've learned that breaking down doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Alexander stared at her, his anger dissolving into something raw and unfamiliar. For the first time in 3 years, someone had seen his pain and matched it with their own. Someone had looked at his wealth and seen past it to the man drowning underneath. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken understanding, while 500 witnesses held their breath. The silence shattered like the champagne glass had moments before when Senator Holloway began a slow, deliberate clap. Others joined in, tentative at first, then building to a crescendo of applause that felt more like a judgment than approval. Alexander's face flushed crimson as he realized what had just happened. He had exposed himself completely, laid bare his deepest wounds in front of the city's most powerful people, and they were treating it like entertainment. "Beautiful speech," Senator Holloway said, her smile sharp as a blade. "So authentic. So vulnerable. I'm sure the morning papers will have a field day with this." Alexander's jaw clenched. He could already see the headlines. Billionaire's breakdown, Thornton's charity meltdown, CEO loses control. His competitors would smell blood in the water. His stock would plummet. Jenkins would use this as ammunition for the hostile takeover. "Excuse me," he said curtly, pushing past Isabella without meeting her eyes. He couldn't look at her, not now. Not when she had stripped away his armor so effortlessly, leaving him naked and exposed in front of everyone who mattered in his professional world. Isabella watched him go, her heart pounding. She had overstepped massively. You didn't confront billionaires at charity galas. You didn't challenge men who could destroy your life with a single phone call. The broken glass in her hands seemed to mock her, sharp reminders of how easily things could shatter. "Miss Martinez." The voice belonged to James Crawford, the hotel's general manager. His expression was thunderous as he approached. "My office." Now. Isabella's stomach dropped. She had worked for Crawford for 2 years, supplementing her income from her day job at the community center and her weekend shifts at the diner. She needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills were mounting, and her younger brother's college tuition was due next month. "Mr. Crawford, I can explain." "Not here." His voice was ice. "Follow me." As Isabella walked through the ballroom, she felt the weight of hundreds of stares. Some were curious, others disapproving. A few wealthy patrons whispered behind their hands, no doubt discussing the spectacle they had just witnessed. Isabella kept her head high, her back straight, but inside she was crumbling. Meanwhile, Alexander had fled to the hotel's penthouse bar, a private sanctuary reserved for VIP guests. The bartender, recognizing him immediately, poured his usual 18-year-old Macallan neat, without being asked. Alexander stared at his reflection in the amber liquid, seeing a stranger. For 3 years, he had built walls around his grief, channeling his pain into work, into success, into the foundation that kept Emma's memory alive. Tonight, one waitress had demolished those walls with a few simple words. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Text messages from board members, reporters, business partners. The video was already online. Someone had filmed his breakdown and posted it to social media. #Billionaire meltdown was trending. He turned his phone face down and took a long sip of whiskey, welcoming the burn. Rough night. Alexander spun around. A man in his 50s sat at the far end of the bar, his tuxedo rumpled, his bow tie undone. Alexander recognized him, Dr. Marcus Webb, head of pediatric oncology at Children's Hospital. They had met several times through the foundation, but had never spoken personally. "You could say that," Alexander replied, his voice hoarse. Dr. Webb raised his own glass, bourbon from the smell. "Mind if I join you? Charity galas make me drink too." Alexander gestured to the empty stool beside him. "Be my guest." They sat in silence for a moment, two men drowning their sorrows in expensive alcohol while the sounds of the party drifted up from below. "You know," Dr. Webb said finally, "that young woman downstairs, she was right." Alexander's grip tightened on his glass. "I don't want to talk about it. I've seen a lot of grief in my line of work. Parents who rage, parents who shut down, parents who throw money at problems thinking it will fix everything." Dr. Webb turned to face Alexander. "But I've never seen someone honor their child's memory the way you have. Emma would be proud." Alexander's throat constricted. "Emma's dead because I couldn't save her. All my money, all my connections, all my power, useless. Emma's dead because cancer is a bastard that doesn't care about bank accounts," Dr. Webb said bluntly. "But the foundation you built in her name? That's saved 17 children this year alone. 17 kids who get to blow out birthday candles because of your grief." Alexander stared at his reflection in the bar mirror, seeing his daughter's eyes looking back at him. Emma had been fearless, compassionate, always standing up for the underdog. She would have loved Isabella's courage tonight. "I made a fool of myself," Alexander said quietly. "You made yourself human," Dr. Webb corrected. "There's a difference." Downstairs, Isabella sat across from James Crawford's desk, her hands folded in her lap. The broken glass had been disposed of, but the damage was done. "Do you understand what you've done?" Crawford's voice was deadly quiet. "Mr. Thornton is one of our most valued clients. He's hosted dozens of events here, brought in millions of dollars in business. And you humiliated him in front of the entire city. I didn't mean to. I don't care what you meant to do. I care about what you did." Crawford leaned forward. "You're fired, Miss Martinez. Security will escort you out." Isabella felt the world tilt beneath her. "Please, Mr. Crawford. I need this job. My mother. Should have thought of that before you decided to lecture a billionaire about grief." Crawford's expression was merciless. "You have 5 minutes to collect your things." As Isabella was escorted through the service corridors, she passed the industrial kitchen where her co-workers watched with sympathy and fear. They all knew the same truth. When you worked in service, you were expendable. One wrong word, one moment of standing up for yourself, and you were gone. But as she gathered her purse and jacket from her locker, Isabella found herself thinking about the look in Alexander Thornton's eyes. Behind all that anger and pain, she had seen something else, a man who had forgotten how to be seen, how to be understood. Have you ever stood up for what was right, even when it cost you something important? Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the biggest rewards. What do you think will happen next? Maybe losing this job was worth it, if it meant that one broken man might remember he wasn't alone in his grief. Outside the hotel, Isabella looked up at the glittering windows of the penthouse bar, wondering if Alexander Thornton was up there, still running from the truth she had shown him. What she didn't know was that he was staring down at the street, watching her walk away, and for the first time in 3 years, feeling something other than emptiness. Isabella's apartment was a 40-minute subway ride from the Metropolitan Grand Hotel, but tonight the journey felt eternal. She sat in the nearly empty car, still wearing her black server's uniform, staring at her reflection in the dark window. The conversation with her mother would be devastating. They needed every penny from that hotel job to keep up with the mounting medical bills. As the train pulled into her station, Isabella's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Miss Martinez, this is Dr. Webb from Children's Hospital. Could we meet tomorrow morning? I have a proposition that might interest you. Isabella frowned, reading the message twice. How had he gotten her number? And why would a doctor want to meet with her? Meanwhile, Alexander stood in his penthouse office at 2 a.m., staring at the city lights while his assistant, Caroline, frantically worked damage control on the other side of his mahogany desk. The video has 3 million views, Caroline said, her voice tight with stress. Jenkins is already calling emergency board meetings. The stock dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Alexander didn't respond. He was thinking about Isabella Martinez, the way she had stood her ground, the tremor in her voice when she spoke about her mother's cancer treatments, the dignity she had maintained even while being humiliated. Sir, Caroline's voice cut through his thoughts. What do you want me to tell the board? Nothing, Alexander said quietly. Cancel all my meetings tomorrow. Sir, you can't just. I said cancel them. Alexander's voice was firm but not harsh. And Caroline, I need you to find someone for me. Isabella Martinez. She worked at the hotel tonight. Caroline's fingers flew across her tablet. The waitress from the video? Yes. Find out everything you can about her. Discreetly. The next morning, Isabella sat in a small cafe near Children's Hospital, nervously checking her phone for the 10th time. Dr. Webb had been vague about the meeting, saying only that it concerned an opportunity related to last night's events. When he finally arrived, Dr. Webb looked tired but determined. He slid into the booth across from her, ordering black coffee from the waitress, who recognized him as a regular. Thank you for coming, he said. I know this is unusual. Dr. Webb, I don't understand. How did you even get my number? James Crawford at the hotel. He's an old friend. Dr. Webb's expression grew serious. Isabella, may I call you Isabella? What you did last night was remarkable. Isabella's cheeks flushed. I got fired for it. Yes, I heard. And that's why I wanted to meet with you. Dr. Webb leaned forward. I've been trying to reach Alexander Thornton for months. The foundation he built in his daughter's memory has been incredibly generous, but Alexander himself has been unreachable. Until last night. I don't understand. In 5 minutes, you accomplished what I've been trying to do for 3 years. You made him feel something other than anger. Dr. Webb's eyes were intense. Alexander Thornton is drowning in his grief, and it's affecting his judgment. The foundation is at risk, not just from his business troubles, but from his isolation. He's making decisions based on pain, not hope. Isabella shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Webb, I'm not a therapist. I'm a waitress who just lost her job. You're a woman who understands loss. Your father died of cancer 2 years ago. You've been working 3 jobs to pay for your mother's treatments. You volunteer at the community center teaching kids to read. Dr. Webb's voice was gentle. You have something Alexander needs, perspective. Isabella's eyes widened. How do you know all that? Because I called in a few favors. Isabella, I want to offer you a job. Before she could respond, the cafe door chimed, and Alexander Thornton walked in. He looked different in the morning light, younger somehow, his usual armor of expensive suits replaced by dark jeans and a simple gray sweater. But his eyes held the same haunted quality she remembered. You set this up, Isabella said to Dr. Webb, her voice sharp with betrayal. I did, Dr. Webb admitted, because you both need this conversation. Alexander approached their table cautiously, like a man walking into a trap. Miss Martinez, I want to apologize for last night. Which part? Isabella asked. The public humiliation or getting me fired? Alexander winced. Both. All of it. He looked at Dr. Webb. Marcus, what is this about? Sit down, Alexander. Dr. Webb's voice carried the authority of someone who had delivered difficult news to countless families. We need to talk. Reluctantly, Alexander slid into the booth next to Dr. Webb, across from Isabella. The small space felt charged with tension. "Your foundation is in trouble," Dr. Webb said bluntly. "Not financially, the money is still there. But the heart of it is dying. You've been so focused on honoring Emma's memory that you've forgotten what she actually cared about. Don't," Alexander's voice was warning. "Don't use my daughter to manipulate me." "Emma used to sneak down to the children's ward," Dr. Webb continued, ignoring Alexander's protest. "Even when she was sick, even when she could barely walk, she would sit with the other kids and read to them. She told me once that the worst part about being sick wasn't the pain, it was feeling invisible." Isabella watched Alexander's face crumble slightly at the memory. She said that when adults looked at her, they saw cancer first, Emma second. But when she read to the other kids, she felt like herself again. Dr. Webb's voice was soft but relentless. "Your foundation funds research and treatments, which is wonderful. But it doesn't fund hope. It doesn't fund connection. It doesn't fund the human touch that Emma knew was just as important as medicine." "What are you suggesting?" Alexander asked, his voice barely audible. "I'm suggesting that your foundation needs a heart again. Someone who understands that healing isn't just about curing disease. It's about restoring dignity, connection, hope." Dr. Webb looked at Isabella. "Someone who can look at a billionaire having a breakdown and see a father in pain." Isabella's hands trembled slightly. "Dr. Webb, I'm not qualified." "You're overqualified," Dr. Webb interrupted. "You have a master's degree in social work that you never got to use because life got in the way. You speak 3 languages. You've been volunteering with terminally ill patients for 2 years. And most importantly, you have something that can't be taught, the ability to see people as they really are." Alexander was staring at Isabella with new understanding. "You're not just a waitress. I'm a waitress, a tutor, a home health aide, and a dozen other things because that's what it takes to survive," Isabella said quietly. "But yes, I used to dream of doing more." "Then do it," Dr. Webb said. "Alexander, the foundation needs a director of patient services. Someone who can bridge the gap between the medical side and the human side. Someone who can help families navigate not just the financial burden of childhood cancer, but the emotional one." Alexander looked at Isabella, really looked at her, and saw what he had missed the night before. Not just a waitress who had stood up to him, but a woman who had turned her own pain into purpose. "The job pays well," Alexander said quietly. "Enough to cover your mother's treatments and your brother's college tuition." Isabella's breath caught. "How do you?" "I had you investigated," Alexander admitted. "I needed to understand who you were. Who you really were." The admission should have angered her, but instead, Isabella felt a strange sense of relief. Here was honesty, raw and uncomfortable, but real. "There's one condition," Alexander continued. "You work directly with me. The foundation board, the grant applications, the hospital visits, all of it. I need." He paused, struggling with the words. "I need someone who won't let me hide anymore." Isabella looked between the 2 men, understanding that this moment would change everything. She could walk away, find another job, keep her life small and safe. Or she could step into something bigger, something that scared her, something that might actually matter. "When do I start?" she asked. For the first time since his daughter's death, Alexander Thornton smiled. 3 weeks into her new role as Director of Patient Services, Isabella had learned that Alexander Thornton's penthouse office felt more like a mausoleum than a workspace. The walls were lined with awards, business achievements, and newspaper clippings chronicling his rise to power. But tucked away in the corner, almost hidden behind a stack of financial reports, sat a small framed photo of a girl with bright eyes and a radiant smile. Emma. Isabella had been studying the foundation's files when she noticed Alexander hadn't touched the photo once during their daily meetings. He would glance at it, sometimes for several seconds, but never pick it up. Never allow himself that small comfort. The Morrison family is asking for an extension on their grant application, Isabella said, reviewing the morning's correspondence. Their daughter is responding well to treatment, but they need help with housing costs while she's in the hospital. Alexander nodded absently, his attention focused on his laptop screen. Over the past weeks, their working relationship had been professional but distant. He had been true to his word about not hiding. He showed up, he listened, he approved her recommendations. But there was still a wall between them, built from grief and maintained by habit. "Alexander," Isabella said gently, "are you listening?" He looked up, and for a moment she saw past his composed exterior to the exhaustion beneath. "I'm sorry. The Jenkins situation is complicated." Isabella had heard whispers about the hostile takeover attempt. Alexander's emotional breakdown at the charity gala had given his enemies ammunition, and they were using it ruthlessly. But she had also seen how he'd thrown himself into foundation work with renewed intensity, as if trying to prove something to himself or to someone else. "Maybe we should take a break," Isabella suggested. "When's the last time you left this office?" "I left yesterday. I went to the—" Alexander stopped, his face closing off. "You went where?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "Nowhere important." But Isabella had learned to read his moods, the subtle tells that revealed when he was avoiding something painful. "Alexander, where did you go?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, with visible effort, he said, "I went to see Emma's grave." The admission hung in the air between them. Isabella set down her files, giving him her full attention. "I go every few weeks," Alexander continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I tell her about the foundation, about the kids we're helping. He swallowed hard. "I tell her I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" Alexander's laugh was bitter. "For everything. For not being there enough when she was sick. For being so focused on finding a cure that I missed just being her father. For the promises I made that I couldn't keep." Isabella felt her heart breaking for this man who carried so much guilt. "What promises?" Alexander was quiet for so long that Isabella thought he wouldn't answer. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small, worn piece of paper. His hands shook slightly as he unfolded it. "She wrote me a letter," he said. "Near the end, when she was too weak to talk much. She gave it to me the night before she died." Isabella waited, understanding that this was sacred ground. "She said she wasn't afraid of dying because she knew I would take care of all the other kids who were scared and alone. She said she trusted me to make sure no other father would have to watch his daughter fade away." Alexander's voice cracked. "She said she was proud of me for being so strong, and that she knew I would keep being strong even after she was gone." Tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks. "Oh, Alexander." "But I wasn't strong," Alexander continued. "I fell apart. I became this cold, angry person who couldn't connect with anyone. I built walls around my heart and told myself it was to protect Emma's memory, but really it was just cowardice. I was afraid to feel anything because feeling meant acknowledging that she was really gone." Isabella reached across the desk and gently touched his hand. "You're not a coward. You're human." "She wanted me to help scared, lonely kids," Alexander said. "But how can I help them when I'm still that scared, lonely kid myself?" The question hung between them, heavy with years of suppressed pain. Isabella understood now why Alexander had been so distant, why he worked tirelessly but never seemed to find joy in it. He was trying to honor his daughter's memory while punishing himself for surviving when she couldn't. "Can I see the letter?" Isabella asked softly. Alexander hesitated, then handed her the fragile piece of paper. Isabella read Emma's childish handwriting, the words blurred in places where tears, both old and new, had fallen. "Daddy, I know you're scared, but you don't have to be. I'm not going anywhere really. I'll be in every kid you help, every family you save, every moment you choose love instead of fear." The strongest thing you can do is let people see your heart. That's how you help the scared ones, by showing them it's okay to be scared and that they're not alone. I love you infinity times infinity. Always, Emma. Isabella's breath caught. Alexander, she wasn't asking you to be strong. She was asking you to be vulnerable, to let your heart show. Alexander stared at the letter, seeing his daughter's words with new eyes. I've been doing it all wrong, haven't I? You've been doing it afraid, Isabella corrected. There's a difference. At that moment, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Webb. Emergency at the hospital. The Patterson family needs you. Both of you. Isabella and Alexander exchanged glances. The Patterson family was one of their newest cases. 7-year-old Lucy was battling the same rare cancer that had taken Emma. We should go, Isabella said. But as they prepared to leave, Alexander did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He picked up Emma's photo, looked at it directly, and whispered, I'm ready to try again, sweetheart. Help me be brave. Isabella watched him tuck the photo into his jacket pocket, understanding that something fundamental had shifted. The man who had been hiding behind grief was finally ready to let love lead the way. They were about to discover just how much courage that would require. Children's Hospital at night had a different energy than during the day. The fluorescent lights seemed softer, the hallways quieter, and the weight of hope and fear felt more concentrated. Isabella and Alexander walked side by side through the pediatric oncology ward, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. Room 314, Dr. Webb had said. Lucy Patterson, 7 years old. Same type of cancer Emma had. The family is struggling. As they approached the room, they could hear voices through the partially open door. A man's voice, thick with exhaustion and barely controlled panic. I don't understand the insurance forms, Sarah. They keep saying pre-authorization and out-of-network, and I can't think straight anymore. It's okay, David. We'll figure it out. A woman's voice, gentler but equally strained. Isabella knocked softly and pushed the door open. Inside, a young couple sat beside a hospital bed where a small girl with a bald head and enormous brown eyes was coloring in a princess coloring book. The similarity to Emma was striking. The same age, the same quiet dignity despite her illness, the same way of focusing intently on small tasks to avoid thinking about big fears. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson? I'm Isabella Martinez from the Thornton Foundation, and this is... Alexander Thornton, David Patterson interrupted, his eyes widening. You're the billionaire. From the video. Alexander's jaw tightened slightly, but Isabella noticed he didn't retreat as he might have weeks ago. Instead, he stepped forward and extended his hand. I'm Emma's father, Alexander said simply. And I'm here because I understand what you're going through. The room fell silent except for the quiet scratching of Lucy's crayons. The little girl looked up from her coloring book, studying Alexander with the directness that only children possess. Your daughter had cancer too? Lucy asked, her voice small but clear. Alexander's breath caught. He glanced at Isabella, who nodded encouragingly, then knelt beside Lucy's bed so they were at eye level. Yes, he said softly. Her name was Emma. She was exactly your age when she got sick. Did she get better? Lucy asked, and Isabella could see Alexander's heart breaking in real time. No, sweetheart. She didn't. Alexander's voice was gentle but honest. But she taught me something very important before she went to heaven. What? Alexander pulled Emma's photo from his pocket, the one he'd carried with him from the office. She taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep coloring your pictures and loving your family even when you are scared. Lucy studied the photo with serious eyes. She's pretty. She looks nice. She was the nicest person I ever knew, Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. And she would have loved your princess picture. Pink was her favorite color. For the first time since they'd arrived, Lucy smiled, a small, shy thing, but genuine. "Want to color with me? I have extra crayons." Isabella watched, her heart swelling, as this billionaire businessman who commanded boardrooms and built empires sat cross-legged on a hospital floor, carefully coloring within the lines of a princess dress while a sick little girl directed his technique. "The crown needs more sparkles, Mr. Alex," Lucy said seriously. "Princesses always have sparkly crowns." "You're absolutely right," Alexander replied, adding elaborate flourishes to the tiara. "Emma always said that too." While Alexander and Lucy colored, Isabella sat with David and Sarah Patterson, helping them navigate the maze of insurance paperwork and foundation benefits. But she found herself watching Alexander more than the forms. She had never seen him like this, relaxed, present, genuinely connected to another person's joy instead of drowning in his own pain. "He's different than I expected," Sarah Patterson whispered to Isabella. "From the video, I thought he'd be angry." "He was," Isabella said quietly. But anger was just grief wearing a disguise. After an hour, Lucy's eyelids began to droop. The chemotherapy made her tired, and it was well past her bedtime. Alexander carefully capped the crayons and handed Lucy her finished picture. "This is beautiful work, Princess Lucy," he said formally. Emma would have been very impressed. Lucy smiled sleepily. "Will you come color with me again?" The question caught Alexander off guard. He looked at Isabella, then back at Lucy. "Would you like me to?" "Yes, please. And maybe next time you can tell me more stories about Emma." Alexander's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time, they weren't tears of pure grief. "I'd like that very much." As they prepared to leave, David Patterson pulled Alexander aside. "Mr. Thornton, I need you to know what you did tonight, sitting with Lucy, treating her like she mattered. That's worth more than any check you could write." Alexander shook his hand, understanding flooding through him. "She does matter. They all matter." In the elevator afterward, Isabella and Alexander stood in comfortable silence, both processing what had just happened. "Thank you," Alexander said finally. "For what?" "For helping me remember why I started the foundation. For helping me remember Emma's real message." He pulled out his phone and scrolled to his notes app. "I want to do something. A new program, not just financial assistance, but emotional support. Art therapy, music therapy, family counseling. Things that feed the soul while medicine heals the body." Isabella smiled. "Emma would love that." "I want to call it the Emma Grace Program," Alexander continued, his voice gaining strength. "And I want you to run it, not as an employee, but as my partner." The word partner hung in the air between them, carrying weight beyond its professional meaning. Isabella felt her heart skip, recognizing the shift in their relationship. From adversaries to colleagues to something deeper, something that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. Have you ever found unexpected connection in the middle of pain? Sometimes our greatest purpose emerges from our deepest wounds. What do you think this new partnership will bring? "Partners," Isabella agreed, and when their hands touched as they shook on it, neither of them pulled away. For the first time since Emma's death, Alexander felt hope stirring in his chest. Not just for the children they would help, but for the possibility that his own heart might heal enough to love again. 2 months later, the Emma Grace program had become everything Alexander and Isabella had dreamed it could be. The pediatric ward buzzed with new energy. Art therapy sessions filled the hallways with laughter, music therapy brought joy to treatment rooms, and family counseling sessions helped parents navigate the emotional maze of childhood cancer. Alexander found himself spending more time at the hospital than in his corporate office, and for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. He also found himself falling in love. It had happened gradually, then all at once. Isabella's quiet strength, her ability to see beauty in broken things, her way of making him feel like a man worth knowing rather than a fortune worth impressing. It had crept into his heart like sunrise, inevitable and transformative. They were reviewing grant applications in the Foundation's conference room when Alexander finally found the courage to voice what had been building between them for weeks. "Isabella," he said, looking up from the Morrison family's renewal paperwork, "would you have dinner with me tonight? Not for the Foundation. Just us." Isabella's pen stilled in her hand. She had felt the shift too. The way their professional conversations had become more personal, the way their hands lingered when they passed documents, the way Alexander looked at her sometimes like she was the answer to a question he'd been afraid to ask. "Alexander, I." Her response was interrupted by the conference room door bursting open. Caroline, Alexander's assistant, stood in the doorway, her face pale and tight with panic. "Mr. Thornton, you need to see this. Now." She thrust a tablet into Alexander's hands. On the screen was a news article from Financial Tribune, the headline blazing in bold letters. "Billionaire's charity scam. Thornton Foundation under investigation for fraud." Alexander's blood turned to ice as he read the opening paragraph. Sources within the Thornton Foundation reveal that CEO Alexander Thornton has been using charity funds for personal expenses, including luxury accommodations and suspicious payments to Foundation employees. The Department of Justice has opened a formal investigation into potential embezzlement charges. "This is impossible," Alexander breathed. "Every expense is documented, every payment approved by the board." "Keep reading," Caroline said grimly. The article continued. "Of particular concern is a $200,000 payment made to Isabella Martinez, a former waitress with no relevant qualifications who was hired as Director of Patient Services following her public confrontation with Thornton at a charity gala. Sources suggest Martinez may have used personal leverage over the emotionally unstable billionaire to secure the lucrative position." Isabella felt the room spinning around her. "Alexander, I never. "I know," Alexander said quickly, but she could see doubt flickering in his eyes. Not doubt about her innocence, but doubt about his own judgment, his ability to trust his feelings after 3 years of emotional numbness. Caroline cleared her throat. "There's more. Richard Jenkins is calling an emergency board meeting for tonight. He's demanding your immediate resignation as CEO of both the company and the Foundation." Alexander's hands clenched into fists. "Jenkins orchestrated this. He's been planning this since the charity gala." "The timing is suspicious," Caroline agreed. "The investigation announcement came just hours after you submitted the Emma Grace program expansion proposal to the board. Someone with inside access leaked financial records to make legitimate expenses look improper." Isabella's phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. Then a flood of notifications as the news story spread across social media. She looked at the screen and her heart sank. Reporters were already calling. Her mother's nursing home had received inquiries, and her brother's college had left a voicemail about concerning allegations. "I have to go," Isabella said, standing abruptly. "I need to protect my family from this." "Isabella, wait." Alexander reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Don't you see what's happening?" Her voice was sharp with pain and anger. "This is exactly what Jenkins wanted. He couldn't destroy you financially, so he's destroying you personally. And I'm the perfect weapon, the opportunistic waitress who seduced the grieving billionaire." "That's not what happened," Alexander said firmly. "Isn't it?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Be honest, Alexander. If this story had come out about any other Foundation director, would you have doubts? Would you wonder if your judgment was compromised by emotion?" Alexander's silence was answer enough. "I thought so," Isabella whispered. "You know what the worst part is? For a few weeks, I actually believed I could be more than just another scandal in your life. I believed I could be worthy of someone like you. You are worthy. I'm a waitress, Alexander. A woman who works 3 jobs to pay her mother's medical bills. In what world do we make sense together? Isabella's voice broke. I was stupid to think this could work. I was stupid to think I could fit into your world without destroying both of us. She gathered her purse and jacket, moving toward the door with forced composure. Where are you going? Alexander demanded. I'm resigning from the foundation, effective immediately. Isabella's voice was steady now, professional. It's the only way to protect the Emma Grace program. Without me here, Jenkins can't use our relationship against you. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for this foundation. Isabella turned back to face him, and Alexander saw something in her eyes that terrified him. Resignation, finality, the same look he'd seen in Emma's eyes near the end. It's not sacrifice, Alexander. It's reality. Some fairy tales don't get happy endings. She paused at the door. Tell Lucy Patterson that I'm sorry I won't be able to finish coloring with her. Tell her that princesses sometimes have to be brave in different ways. And then she was gone, leaving Alexander alone with the wreckage of everything he'd thought he was building, his foundation, his purpose, his heart. Outside the building, Isabella sat in her car and finally let herself cry. Through her tears, she saw Alexander at the conference room window, silhouetted against the late afternoon light. He looked exactly like he had that night at the charity gala, a man trapped behind glass, unreachable and utterly alone. The difference was this time, she was the one walking away. And both of their hearts were breaking. Alexander sat alone in his penthouse office as the city lights began to twinkle below, each one a reminder of lives being lived while his own felt suspended in amber. 3 days had passed since Isabella walked out, 3 days since his world had collapsed for the second time in 3 years. The difference was, this time he had chosen the collapse himself. The board meeting with Jenkins had been a massacre. Without Isabella there to defend herself, without Alexander willing to expose the depth of their relationship, the allegations had hung in the air like poison gas. Alexander had maintained her innocence, but his own doubt, that momentary hesitation when she'd asked if he questioned his judgment, had been enough to seal both their fates. He'd retained his position as CEO by the narrowest of margins, but the foundation was under federal investigation. The Emma Grace program was suspended, and Isabella's reputation was in ruins. The woman who had taught him to feel again had been sacrificed on the altar of his own cowardice. Emma's photo sat on his desk now, no longer hidden in his pocket. He'd been staring at it for hours, remembering his daughter's words. The strongest thing you can do is let people see your heart. I failed her again, Emma, he whispered to the photograph. I failed you, and I failed Isabella, and I failed myself. His phone buzzed. Dr. Webb. Alexander, I just heard. Is it true? Is Isabella really gone? Yes. The word felt like gravel in Alexander's throat. You know this is all fabricated, right? I've reviewed every foundation expense. There's nothing inappropriate about Isabella's salary or her hiring. I know. Then why aren't you fighting for her? Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Because maybe they're right. Maybe I did let my emotions cloud my judgment. Maybe I hired her because I was lonely, not because she was qualified. Bullshit. Dr. Webb's voice was sharp. I've watched that woman work for 2 months. She's brilliant, compassionate, and exactly what the foundation needed. The kids adore her, the families trust her, and she's helped more people in 8 weeks than most directors help in 8 years. It doesn't matter now. It's the only thing that matters. Alexander, Lucy Patterson has been asking for you every day. Her parents say she won't color unless Miss Bella and Mr. Alex are both there. That little girl is fighting for her life, and you're abandoning her because you're afraid of what people might think. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. That's exactly what you're doing. You're so terrified of being vulnerable, of admitting you love Isabella, that you're willing to let Jenkins destroy everything Emma believed in. After Dr. Webb hung up, Alexander sat in the gathering darkness, feeling the weight of his choices. He thought about Isabella, probably sitting in her tiny apartment, wondering if she'd ever work again. He thought about Lucy Patterson coloring alone. He thought about Emma's letter, about choosing love over fear. His computer chimed with an email. The sender made his blood run cold. Richard Jenkins. Alexander, I wanted you to know that the Martinez situation was regrettable but necessary. You've always been too emotional for business. It's what made you weak after Emma died, and it's what made you vulnerable now. The investigation will quietly disappear once you sign the attached documents transferring control of both the company and foundation to the board. This way, you can retire gracefully and avoid further scandal. Consider it a kindness. Richard. Alexander opened the attachment. It was essentially a surrender. His life's work, his daughter's legacy, everything he'd built, handed over to the man who had orchestrated this entire nightmare. But as he read the legalese, something inside him began to burn. Not the cold rage he'd carried for 3 years, but something hotter and cleaner, righteous fury on behalf of everyone Jenkins had tried to destroy. He thought about Isabella's courage the night they met, the way she'd stood up to him when everyone else either feared him or wanted something from him. He thought about her working 3 jobs to save her mother, about her giving up her dreams to help others, about her walking away from the foundation to protect it. He thought about Emma's letter. That's how you help the scared ones, by showing them it's okay to be scared and that they're not alone. Alexander picked up his phone and called his lawyer, then his accountant, then his private investigator, then every board member who wasn't in Jenkins' pocket. Meanwhile, Isabella sat on her mother's hospital bed, holding her hand while she slept. The medical bills were mounting again, and without the foundation salary, Isabella was back to impossible math, working every hour she could find and still falling short. Her phone had been ringing constantly, reporters, job interviewers who'd suddenly reconsidered their offers, friends who wanted gossip disguised as concern. She'd stopped answering. But when Dr. Webb's name appeared on her screen, she picked up. Isabella, I need you to listen to me carefully. Can you get to Children's Hospital tonight? Dr. Webb, I can't. The investigation, the scandal. Lucy Patterson is asking for you. She's having a rough night, and she specifically requested both you and Alexander. Isabella's heart clenched. I can't see Alexander right now. What if I told you he's planning something? Something that might change everything. What do you mean? I mean Alexander Thornton might finally be ready to choose love over fear. But he can't do it alone. Isabella closed her eyes, thinking about Lucy's sweet face, about the Emma Grace program, about all the children who needed advocates. I'll be there in an hour, she said. What she didn't know was that Alexander was already at the hospital, sitting beside Lucy's bed, reading her a story about a princess who learned that real magic came not from castles or crowns, but from the courage to love with an open heart. Have you ever had to choose between playing it safe and fighting for what you believe in? Sometimes the biggest risks come right before the biggest breakthroughs. What do you think Alexander is planning? Isabella's footsteps echoed softly through the hospital corridors as she made her way to Lucy's room, her heart pounding with each step. She had changed into her best dress, a simple navy blue that she'd worn to her college graduation, because somehow this felt like another kind of commencement, an ending and a beginning wrapped into one moment. As she approached room 314, she heard familiar voices, Alexander's deep baritone and Lucy's bright giggle. But there were other voices too, ones she didn't recognize. Isabella paused at the doorway, uncertain. Inside, she found a scene that took her breath away. Lucy's room was filled with people, other families from the ward, Dr. Webb, several nurses, and at least a dozen men and women in business suits. Alexander sat beside Lucy's bed, but he wasn't alone. Spread across every available surface were documents, laptops, and what appeared to be a small army of lawyers and accountants. "Miss Bella." Lucy spotted her first, her face lighting up with pure joy. "You came. Mr. Alex said you might come." Alexander looked up, and Isabella saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not just hope, but certainty. Purpose. The look of a man who had finally stopped running from his own heart. "Isabella," he said, standing slowly. "Thank you for coming. Dr. Webb said Lucy was having a difficult night." "I am having a difficult night," Lucy said seriously from her bed. "But not because I'm sick. Because Mr. Alex was sad without you, and when Mr. Alex is sad, I'm sad too." One of the suited men, Isabella recognized him as Alexander's lawyer, cleared his throat. "Mr. Thornton, perhaps we should explain to Ms. Martinez what's happening here." Alexander nodded, then walked over to Isabella. "I need to tell you something. About the investigation, about Jenkins, about everything." "Alexander, I don't think. Please." His voice was gentle but firm. "Let me finish what I should have said 3 days ago." Isabella found herself nodding, drawn by the quiet intensity in his voice. "Richard Jenkins orchestrated this entire scandal," Alexander began. "He leaked selective financial records to make legitimate expenses look suspicious. He fed information to reporters. He even had someone pose as a foundation insider to give quotes about your hiring." Isabella felt the air leave her lungs. "How do you know this?" "Because I hired the best investigators money can buy, and they found the paper trail. Phone records, emails, financial transfers, everything." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Jenkins thought he could use my grief against me, use my feelings for you as a weapon to destroy us both." "Your feelings for me?" Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. Alexander took her hands in his, and this time she didn't pull away. "Isabella, I love you. Not because you help me heal, not because you remind me what it feels like to hope, but because you're brave and brilliant and beautiful, and you see people, really see them, in a way that makes the world better just by existing in it." Tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks. "Alexander, I love you," he continued, "and I was a coward for not saying it when it mattered. I was a coward for letting you walk away, for letting you think for even 1 second that you weren't worthy of everything good in this world. But the investigation is over." Dr. Webb stepped forward, grinning. "As of 2 hours ago, the Department of Justice announced that all charges have been dropped due to lack of evidence. In fact, they're now investigating Richard Jenkins for filing false reports and attempted extortion." Isabella's legs felt weak. "I don't understand." Alexander's lawyer spoke up. "Mr. Thornton didn't just prove your innocence, Ms. Martinez. He also presented evidence that Jenkins has been embezzling from Thornton Industries for years, using his position to funnel money into shell companies. The man who accused you of fraud was committing actual fraud." "But that's not the best part," Lucy piped up from her bed, bouncing with excitement despite her illness. "Tell her the best part, Mr. Alex." Alexander smiled, the first real smile Isabella had seen from him since their world fell apart. "The best part is that the board voted tonight. Unanimously. Richard Jenkins has been removed from all positions, and the Emma Grace program has been expanded to 5 more hospitals. And," Dr. Webb added with a grin, "the board also unanimously approved a motion to make you permanent director of the Emma Grace program, with a seat on the Foundation's executive committee." Isabella stared at the faces around her, all these people who had worked through the night to clear her name, to restore her reputation, to give her back her purpose. But her eyes kept returning to Alexander, to the man who had chosen to fight for her when she couldn't fight for herself. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do all this?" "Because Emma's letter was right," Alexander said softly. "The strongest thing I can do is let people see my heart. And my heart belongs to you." Lucy clapped her hands together. "This is just like in the princess stories. The brave knight defeats the dragon, and wins the princess. Isabella laughed through her tears. Except in this story, I think we both saved each other. Alexander cupped her face gently, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Isabella Martinez, will you take back your job? Will you help me build something beautiful? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you are worthy of every good thing? Yes, Isabella whispered. To all of it. Yes. When Alexander kissed her, the room erupted in applause, from the lawyers, the doctors, the families who had gathered to witness this moment of justice and love. But Isabella heard none of it. All she could focus on was the feeling of coming home, of finding her place in the world, of loving a man who had learned to love her back with his whole heart. I have one more surprise, Alexander murmured against her lips. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Isabella's breath caught. I know it's soon, Alexander said, his voice shaking slightly. I know we've only known each other for 3 months. But I also know that some hearts recognize each other instantly, and mine has been yours since the moment you looked at me and saw past my walls. He dropped to one knee beside Lucy's hospital bed, and the little girl squealed with delight. Isabella Martinez, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in life, in love, in building something beautiful from the broken pieces of our past? Through tears of joy, Isabella saw Emma's photo tucked into Alexander's jacket pocket. A reminder that love doesn't end with loss, but transforms into something new and lasting. Yes, she said, her voice strong and sure. Yes, Alexander Thornton. I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Lucy declared loudly, This is the best princess story ever. And Mr. Alex, you have to invite me to the wedding because I helped. You'll be our flower girl, Isabella promised, kissing the little girl's forehead. True love stories aren't about perfect people. They're about imperfect people who choose to grow together. Have you ever experienced a love that changed everything? Share your thoughts about second chances and finding love in unexpected places. 6 months later, Alexander and Isabella were married in the Children's Hospital Chapel, surrounded by the families they served and the children they had helped heal. Lucy Patterson, her cancer in remission, scattered rose petals with the serious concentration of someone who understood that love was the most important job in the world. As they exchanged vows, Alexander looked at his bride and saw not just his future, but Emma's legacy living on. In every child they would help, every family they would support, every moment they chose love over fear. Isabella looked at her husband and saw not a billionaire or a broken man, but her partner in building something beautiful from the ashes of grief. Together, they had learned that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the connections we make and the hearts we touch. In the front row, Dr. Webb wiped away a tear and whispered to the empty seat beside him, Your daddy did good, Emma. He finally learned to be brave. And somewhere in the eternal space between memory and hope, a little girl with bright eyes smiled, knowing that love, real, transformative, healing love, had won again. And that's how 2 broken hearts learned that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who chooses to heal alongside you. Alexander and Isabella's journey reminds us that our deepest wounds can become the source of our greatest purpose, and that sometimes the most unexpected encounters change everything. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment where standing up for what's right changed your entire life? Or maybe you found love in the most unexpected place. Your stories inspire these videos, so please share them with our community. And if you enjoyed this emotional journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories of love, redemption, and second chances. We upload new heart-touching stories every week that will make you believe in the power of human connection. Until next time, remember, the strongest thing you can do is let people see your heart. Stay beautiful, stay brave, and keep believing in love.